Kwe Kwe Greetings. Welcome to another video. As I said once before, Kwe Kwe is Algonquin for hello. So hello. I have a lot of things I want to touch on, and I figured I'd give it a shot because the longer I wait to do a video, I'm finding out the more I have piling up to talk about. We've discovered our share screen, and now it's time to make use of that share screen. It's almost as if I should probably do a lot of the videos over, but I know I couldn't do that. What I want to talk about is just basically some of the current events in quote unquote Indian country, what some of the other YouTubers that are indigenous, copper colored, some of the things I hear them talking about. And so I just want to put my spin or my thoughts on what I'm hearing. One of the topics is the word aboriginal. And if anyone has watched any of my videos, you know that I have a big problem with aboriginal, and I don't have a problem saying why. We have to, in my opinion, even as indigenous, we have to really be clear on etymology. When we recognize that word spells are being used on us, then it behooves us to get a clue about etymology. And I'm not saying I always do it, but with the word aboriginal, you have to do it. It's two words being put together. So we have to wonder, why does original have to be prefixed with the prefix ab? And so one of the first things I would like to do is just be clear on the prefix ab. We're going to look at the etymology of ab and figure out another thing. When we do break down etymology, we have to look at every single word in the lineup of the etymological definition of a prefix like ab. So that means we have to look at every word that follows the definition of ab. We have to look at every word and place each word in front of original. Let's do that. Let's start sharing our screen right now. Okay, so now I have to hope that I have, can I close this Zoom without cutting myself off? Yes, good. Okay, so let me close this. Oh, no, I didn't want to close that, actually. I didn't want to close that. Okay, but I did. So let's move on. Can we get to the etymology of that? I put it? This is not the time to be searching for it. Okay, we're gonna have to go to our email to find it because I know, here it is. Okay, so can we open that up? Come on. Yes, the whole email addresses here and all of that stuff. So let me see, let's try to do this. Okay, so here is the word or the prefix ab. And so the way I look at it is we have to look at all of these words. So let's read it. Ab, word forming element meaning away from off, down, denoting disjunction, separation, departure, from Latin ab, off, away, from, in reference to space or distance, also of time. From pi, root, apo, it could be apo, off, away. Also the source Greek apo, off, away, off, away. I think that we can do better than these two words, away from. I have a problem with it, and I'm very, in other words, I'm cool with that. I see problems, and until someone can help look at these definitions or the words, disjunction. Okay, so let's use it. Separation from original. Take each word, a departure from original. Departure, does it sound right? It's a departure from original. So we're departing from the original. But when you depart from something, you're no longer a part of it, right? So aboriginal, a departure away from the original. A separation from why are we being separated? If it's a bloodline, there's no separation, right? Will we say that a royal family is separate from the king or the queen? Or would we say, we use a better word? A disjunction from original. Disjunction? That don't sound right either. And I did define disjunction. Let's see if we can pull that up. I'm not going to go to my files because I have it in my files, but I'm just going to do it. Because then it pulls up I have to pull up my email and all of that. I'm not really trying to do all of that. Disjunction definition. So here's the definition of disjunction. Can we make this bigger? No, we can't. So we're just going to have to use it. A lack of correspondence or consistency. So we're a lack of correspondence with the original, or a lack of consistency with the original. This is what aboriginal means. Now we have to make a distinction from aborigine, because that's a different word. I think they can both be done away with, personally. So let's see. A disjunction, the relationship between two distinct alternatives. A statement expressing the relationship between two distinct alternatives, especially one using the word or. So you can be aboriginal. Aboriginals is being, from what I just read, it's like you could be one or another. You can be aboriginal or something, or original or something else. Detachment. Okay, so these are some similar words to disjunction. Disconnection from the original. Detachment from the original. Severance from the, see, if we don't learn anything about how the colonizer works, let's do it today, please. What the colonizer will do is slide in words that have multiple meanings. So there might be one that sort of says what we're trying to say, but then there'll be others. I mean, in one of my videos, I said, aboriginal has, look it up. It has one definition going this way, one definition going that way, another one go this way. But really what I meant was the prefix is what's doing that. away from, so people are assuming that, oh, that means we came away from the original. Away from the original? Listen, the ancestors are with us right now. We're not away from them. We might have been, what do you call it, indoctrinated against them, but that doesn't mean we're departed from them, physically or bloodline wise. This is our land. So I will always, always not be too cool with the word Aboriginal. The one time, and what I want to say for our indigenous who are very attached to that word, I can say this. I do believe that in as much as this word is tied to any kind of treaty, or maybe if it was attached to the land that is held in trust, maybe I would say that would be the time to use that word, but that would be just to get what belongs to us and keep it moving. This word, to me, is not something that we wouldn't have chose a word that means a severance in any way. We didn't want to be severed from our ancestors, but who did want us to be severed from our ancestors? That would be the colonizer. That would be the Church of Rome. It would be monotheism in general. So this is why we have to take each little word and figure out, is it consistent with what we're trying to say? Because we never know which version the colonizer is going to use. We'll be loving up on the one that sounds right, but the colonizer will be going by the one that's the exact opposite. So I hope I'm done with this word, really. Some people are saying it's the most empowering thing. I respectfully, I don't agree. I really, truly don't agree. In one of my videos, I said, what's wrong with original? What's wrong with that? Does it not fit? Where did this word? It's two words being put together. It's qualifying the word original, but why do we need to qualify the word original? It's because the colonizer is slipping in a word that makes a severance from the original. If disjunction is one of the words, let's look at it one more time to be sure. Now where to put it? Oops, see, these are other things I want to look at. And now it done disappeared. See, look how they do me. Look how they do me today. Okay, now I can't find it. Okay. That was a video I wanted to show you, a little bit of, because okay, so now I have to look for the union label. Remember that commercial? Okay, so where did I just put I might have to look it up again. I don't really want to have to do that. Let's see. Do I have to pull it from the email? Oh, here we go. It was the email, right? Sorry for that. That was my fault. Ab, word forming element meaning away from. So in other words, the colonizer is using this away from as the main, the bait in the trap, right? But then when you look down here, denoting disjunction, we just looked up disjunction. That's the first thing after away from, denoting disjunction, separation, departure. It's a word spell cooked up by who else? The word masters, the spell masters. Who would that be? That would be what begins with an M. And they promote Morocco. That's who's doing this. And I was ever so happy. What video did I see where it really makes it clear that we're dealing with an, oh yes, the latest Dane Calloway. Kudos to Dane Calloway. Where a brother man is showing us the Pope. Now we really need to get into that. Kissing the feet of Africans. That says it all. That is creature paying homage to creator, okay? That I was happy to see that circle back and be displayed again, because it reminded me. Now, these were the high officials in Africa. These guys are in suits, baby. They are not in some abandoned forest looking with swollen bellies. No, these dudes are in suits, and they're almost as the same color as the navy blue suits, okay? Suits. And I'm not making fun of them, but you know what? This is the ilk of what we're dealing with. This is who we're dealing with behind all of it. Who reared up Europe? Okay, that's so. I think I've covered what I want to cover with Aboriginal. Somebody asked me, what word should we use? You know, I'm not going to try to say that I'm the one that to speak for everybody, but what I did say was the best of my knowledge, you know, and that is, again, use whatever word that they created to get what belongs to us, and that is it. From there, my thing is, what I think we might want to do is each of us, each tribe, go and figure out what we want to be called with our. It could be with our original language, because the English language is a spell maker. It's like it was built to trap and to mislead, you know. So if we don't agree on a term that best describes the thing that matters, the thing that matters is that we make it. That's all that matters. It could be dodo, okay? As long as it came from indigenous, that means we're being self-defined. That's the point I think I would make. Don't use any of their words. Since we having a problem with them, okay, throw them all away, including American Indian, after we get what is being held up in our trust. The next move we might think is, okay, now that we got what belongs to us, our land, the trust money. Empress Holbert did a great video where she showed an article, which I've been trying to get this article ever since. It's on lockdown, y'all. I went, you know, I have access to Lexis and Westlaw. I was able to look in certain databases. Actually, I don't even think it was Westlaw or Lexis, because even they don't go as far back to 1913 when this article came out. So what I did was where did I get it from? New York State Library. They have, I believe they have a database of old New York Times articles. It still won't open. It's not included. Somehow that article is not there. So, but that article says so-called Negroes have 700 million acres. Was it 56? Wait a minute. Either 56 million acres. Oh, no. Oh, wait a minute. I think it was 56 million. Pardon. I think it was 56 million. One was 7 million or 70 million. It was, I wrote it. I think I wrote it down. Let me just see if I got this. Did I write it down? I might have just took the citation, but didn't write the number, but I thought I wrote it down because I needed to look it up in this database that I was looking through. I should have written it down, but not even seeing it. It was a high number, put you that way. But the point is, the article, it was in the millions. It was in the millions. What am I looking at? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got you looking at some advertisements. But yeah, we could focus on that ad while I look at those words and we decide if aboriginal is the best word for us. You know, and we got to be careful with aborigine because that's not the same as aboriginal. One is a noun and one is an adjective, so they're not really the same word. But I'm starting to think that even aborigine, it's a trick word because it's a play on original, which I'm thinking the word original, it doesn't need to be played, you know? So apparently I did not write this down like I thought I did, and I know I did. I guess the question is, where did you write it down? So sorry about that. I feel sworn I literally wrote, but it could have been that I cut and pasted when I was online. Sometimes when you cut and paste, it registers as if I wrote somehow. At least it did this time. And I'm not seeing it. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I thought I wrote it down. But the point is, okay. Okay, I'm not finding this. Could have sworn I wrote this down. Anyway, it's a New York Times article, and it's talking about what we are owed. So we talk about reparations, and they act like they don't know where it will come from. Take it out of the trust. Whatever you reclassified us as, find that trust and route that back to us. That could be your start in giving us the reparations we are owed. Okay? Instead, they're just holding on to it. For what? Waiting for us to not be here? That time won't ever come. But I guess they're hoping, you know, in the meantime, they're going to make money off of it somehow. So they'll be rich while we you know, generations are, you know, feeling it, you know, the lack of resources, you know, and they feel and acting like they're giving us charity when they know damn well they're sitting on a trust that belongs to us. You're not giving us charity. Stop it. You reclassified us and you're holding it onto it. Sounds like some kind of custodian, doesn't it? A wicked custodian holding on to what belongs to you, waiting for what? Who calls themselves a custodian? I'm sorry. It's just becoming very real to me who's behind this. And it's very hard for me not to speak to it. Okay, so this was Aboriginal. Aborigine, again, it's because it's so closely related or appears to be related to the word aboriginal, I say it has to go as well. Yeah. It's just some kind of invention based on the word aboriginal, which is a conjunction, you know, and an adjective. Whereas aborigine is somehow seen as the noun. Okay, but I think I'm done talking about this topic. So what is up next? I wanted to maybe begin the conversation. Should I go out of here? Stop here for a minute. since I'm addressing the. No, I want to maybe begin the conversation of this Iroquois Confederacy. Now, off the bat, we know that that did not include the other, what, thousands of tribes of Indians. So who gave the Iroquois Confederacy this role of representing all indigenous? Was it the colonizer? And you know, the colonizer only needed one. They didn't need all. They just needed one trader. It reminds me of when, because I know the story so well, thank you, Walter Williams, for your book that I always recommend, Historical Origins of Christianity. It's in that instance, it was the priesthood, and Alexander only needed one priesthood to be the traders. And then they become the dominant over everybody because they're in bed with, in that case, it would have been Alexander the Greek. So once the priesthood agrees to make Alexander a god that eventually became Jesus. Yes, read the book, those who dare. If you want to get out of fantasy land, read that book. I see this happening with the Iroquois Confederacy, that one group that the colonizers like, yo, you my dog, you know, that one group that the colonizer just needs one. And then the colonizer can say that they, this one trader, represents all the Indians. So no matter what you feel, we only need is one. And we got you. Because they rocking with us now. They rocking with the big dogs. And so what I learned, you know, I'm learning little bits and pieces, but you know what? We're in a time now where an indigenous, they just really, it's open for everybody. In other words, even if you do a minimum of looking, you will find enough to answer some questions. So let's go into our share screen once again. Okay. What am I doing? Okay, here we go. Okay. So now I believe it was it this? Oh, now I gotta remember which one it was. So we can close that. Was it this one? Oh, that's Algonquin. What was this? I don't think we need that. Okay, it might have been, is it this? Another history of the Algonquin. But there was something here that I wanted to look at as well. So let me see if this touches on what I was trying to look up. Okay, history of the Algonquins, and we're reading this together. I grabbed it, but I skimmed through it. So let's see if we can read through it together. I don't think it's too many pages. Oh, 1 of 7 pages. Ooh. Okay, but we want to give that respect to our Algonquins because Lord knows you got beat down by the Iroquois. So let's hear what you have to say. Let's hear. Okay. Archaeological information suggests that Algonquin people have lived in the Ottawa Valley for at least 8,000 years before the Europeans arrived in North America. Well, already I'm not, maybe I don't know if I want to go here because I don't believe they originated in that territory. That is Algonquin. This is Algonquin territory, you see? All along there, right? And this seems to be the lands that were taken over by Britain. But first it had to be taken by the Iroquois and then transferred to Britain is what it's looking like, you know? I mean, the Algonquins were up here as well. I believe Algonquins were the largest linguistic group, is what I thought I read. So is this what I wanted to read instead? No, maybe this is not it. Okay, so I just want you to see the territory. And I know that my people were right about here in North Carolina. We are right on that eastern coast. And so, you know, I determined that this is where my people were. We were in Algonquin territory because we were Algonquin. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, let's read again. Archaeological information suggests that Algonquin people have lived in the Ottawa Valley for at least 8,000 years before the Europeans arrived in North America. I just want to say, if I pause, I will be back, because as we know, pause works its wonders. That's the one thing I couldn't do when I was recording with my laptop. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but I may need to stop the recording in a bit when my roommate is leaving and it's a bit noisy. So let me start again. Archaeological information suggests that Algonquin people have lived in the Ottawa Valley for at least 8,000 years before the Europeans arrived in North America. I hope you didn't read ahead of me, but it's okay if you did. Algonquin is the name of the cultural linguistic group that includes many tribes, of which the Algonquin are one. Okay, can I read that again? Algonquin is the name of the cultural linguistic group. Okay, so it's a linguistic group. We had a language that includes many tribes, of which the Algonquin are one. Okay. In fact, the Algonquin linguistic group is spread over an extensive territory beyond the Ottawa River, perhaps stretching across a significant part of North America and comprising scores of nations related by language and customs. So not just language, customs. Other members of the Algonquin cultural linguistic group are Mississauga, Ojibwe. I've heard this one brought up a lot recently. Ojibwe sounds very African, but it's not. Ojibwe, Cree, not as opposed to Creek. This is Cree, Abenaki, Micmac, Malachite. That's giving me Egyptian vibes, y'all, because there was a priesthood called the Malachite. The Malachite? Malachite, what's the word? Monophysite and Malachite. Anyway, that word is very similar. Malachite, Montagnai, and the Blackfoot, among others. I think I heard that the Jacksons are Blackfoot, which means they're Algonquin. I thought I heard that, but okay. The source of the word Algonquin is unclear. Some say it came from the Malachite word, meaning they are relatives, which would suggest Algonquins were part of a broad group of Native peoples. Others say Algonquin means at the place of spearing fishes and eels from the bow of a canoe. Okay, because the Algonquins are known for canoes. The website of the Canadian Museum of Civilization in Hull, Quebec states, the arrival of Europeans severely disrupted the life of the Algonquins, the native people who lived in the Ottawa Valley at the time. By the mid-17th century, several deadly diseases had been introduced and great numbers of Algonquins perished. Yeah, okay. Struggles with the neighboring 5 nations. There we go. See? See? Somewhere this is going to have to be addressed because I don't think it ever got resolved. I think the Europeans became the weapon by which 2 indigenous linguistic groups were fighting each other, probably being played by the colonizer for both sides. You know what I'm saying? That is something the colonizer does very well, plays both sides, and it makes us their fools. But in either case, the Iroquois, it looks like they got off with the most recognition out of every other tribe in America. This Great Law of Peace is no joke. The only thing is it did not include, evidently, any other Indians outside of the 5 or 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy being puppeted by Britain is what I came across. I think this is where we're going to hear about it by the end of this reading, because I think it's going to tell us just how the Iroquois were able to get such an edge over all the other tribes. Okay, so let's start reading again. The arrival of Europeans severely disrupted the life of Algonquins, the native people who lived in the Ottawa Valley. What about the East Coast? Because that's where the Europeans arrived at, okay? So I'm a little weary of what I'm reading, but let's go with it, okay? At the time, by the mid-17th century, several deadly diseases had been introduced. Introduced. Sounds like biological warfare, doesn't it? Introduced. And great numbers of Algonquins perished. Well, they were just being pushed around. They didn't perish. They were being taken off their territory. And then I guess once you get them off their territory, you say, oh, they disappeared. Okay. Struggles with the neighboring 5 nations Iroquois Confederacy for control of water routes to the rich fur resources of the hinterland resulted in political intrigue and armed conflict. Together, these factors changed the way of life of the Ottawa Valley Algonquins forever. So this is just something, I guess you could see the website I got this from up there. You know, if you want to, what is this you read? It's just, I just was looking for an overview of the Algonquins. So it was just something I found, but I think it did have something that it pointed out something. Let's see if this is it. The Algonquins were on the Ottawa River and its tributary valleys when the French moved into the area. Okay, but logically, we would have been there before the French. Makes sense. Samuel de Champlain made contact with the Algonquins in 1603, shortly after he established the first permanent French settlement on the St. Lawrence at Tadoussac. In 1610, Algonquin guides accompanied Etienne Brulé on his voyages to the interior of Canada. So we were helping the French to take our territory. It's bad enough we got kicked out of the East Coast, but now we inviting the French to take, our new territory. It was the start of deep involvement by the Algonquins with the French in the fur trade. So we were doing business with the French. And from what I recall, that's when the Iroquois started to want to get in on that business. They kicked us out of our land through some kind of war, fueled by Britain, is what I honestly believe. So they chased us out. Then we start up our gig in the Ottawa Valley, and lo and behold, who comes to mess with us again? They wanted in on that. Being, I guess, with Britain, behind them, it's all political, Okay, it was the start of deep involvement by the Algonquins with the French. So we had a business going, okay, in the fur trade. Every fur trader who hoped to be successful in exploring the interior of Canada prepared for the journey by familiarizing themselves or himself with the Algonquin. Okay? Because we knew our land, right? Language, with the Algonquin language. Okay, same difference. Since it was recognized as the root language for many other Aboriginal languages, it was the root language. The root language. My dear fellow Algonquins, we were the ones who created language, is what I'm reading. Tell me if you read something else. Okay? Let's read it again and see what it sounds like. Since it was recognized as the root language for many other Aboriginal languages. Many. Okay, it's not every, but it's many. Got a little carried away. But that's some serious credentials we got going on right there. Root language. Algonquin is a root language for many. Let's see. Every fur trader who hoped to be successful in exploring the interior of Canada prepared for the journey by familiarizing himself with the Algonquin language, since it was recognized as the root language for many other Aboriginal languages. Today, the political boundary between Quebec and Ontario exists, but in those days, as today, Algonquins lived on both sides of the Ottawa River. In these early days, they were semi-nomadic, because we were being kicked out of our land. Moving from one place to the next. Indians didn't do that, is what came up in, in another indigenous channel, that we didn't really move around like that because we all had our own territory, right? So nomadic wouldn't have been a way of life, okay? Unless you were constantly fighting an enemy, and maybe, also from what I read, I don't know if we're gonna read it here, but the Algonquins, although they were a root language, I think they had an oral tradition that ended up being part of why I think they suffered defeat, because They didn't really have a specific, it was oral traditions that they were going by. So the Iroquois was much more accessible to a colonizer because all their stuff was written out. So that could be manipulated. You can't manipulate something that is not written out. So the Algonquins, what it looks like to me is Britain comes over and they meet Algonquin Indians, okay, on that Atlantic coast. They're treated very well, but they can't really penetrate due to the Algonquins not really having that law set that the colonizer could look at and rewrite. Okay, that's what my guess is from what I am, been reading. Okay, it doesn't mean it's gospel. Okay, but I'm surmising. I'm taking what I know and trying to make sense of it, which will be very important for indigenous to do these days. Really, we have to recreate history because the one we're given, it's a propaganda. So we have to start to see how it would have looked from our point of view. Okay, so today, the political boundary between Quebec and Ontario exists, but in those days, as today, Algonquins lived on both sides of the Ottawa River. In these early days, they were semi-nomadic, moving from one place to the next in search of food from hunting, trapping, fishing, and gathering. Okay, so that's a few more reasons why they might move, but I still think that territory, we stayed pretty much in our territories because other Indians had their territories, so we couldn't come and hunt and fish on, other Indians' land. We had like some sort of respect for each other's space. Okay. Travel was by foot and by birch bark canoe in the summer months, and toboggans and snowshoes in the winter. Clothing and tents were made from animal skins, though tents, also known as wigwams, were sometimes made of birch bark during the summer months. Groups gathering along the river to fish, hunt, and socialize. During the summer months, groups gathered along the river to fish, hunt, and socialize. When winter arrived, smaller groups spread out into small hunting camps made up of large related families. The climate was harsh and starvation was not uncommon. When we first met the Algonquins at Quebec, Samuel de Champlain was so impressed with the Algonquins' furs. Oh, God. Oh, boy. Okay. That he explored the St. Lawrence as far west as the Lachine Rapids. Champlain left for France shortly afterwards, but upon his return in 1608, he immediately moved his fur trade upstream to a new post to shorten the distance that the Algonquin were required to travel for trade. Oh, how nice of him. Champlain was anxious to conclude treaties with both the Algonquin and their Montagnaeus allies, both of whom were allied against the feared Iroquois Confederacy. The Five Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy included Mohawks, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. They were later joined by the Tuscarora to become 6 nations. That's what I thought, so they were saying 5 before, but I said 6 because I must have remembered it. Champlain felt a treaty with the Algonquins would preclude competition from his European rivals, who were mainly the Dutch, but also the English. The Algonquin Montagnas, Montagniers, and their Huron allies were reluctant to commit themselves to the long, dangerous journey to trading posts north of the Ottawa River unless the French were willing to help them in their war against members of the Iroquois Confederacy. I just still think that this has to be addressed, at some point. I don't think these differences were ever really resolved. And I think it led to the Iroquois taking a very leadership role where no one gave them that authority. They just, it was due to this dominance, and then they're speaking for all indigenous people, but maybe not in the best interest of these other indigenous people, They're basically nuzzing up with the colonizer is what, so let's read on. In this, the French provided support and gained great commercial opportunities. Okay, so they were looking for the French to help them with the war against other members of the Iroquois Confederacy. But on the other hand, too, wouldn't somehow the French kind of want to side with other Europeans, on the down low, perhaps? Okay. So, meaning Britain. Okay. Because in the end, wouldn't it be great to just not have to deal with any Indians when you have all this fur and these plantations and the gold and silver, the riches? Wouldn't it be just great to not deal with any Indians? Okay, so, however, the Iroquois remained, let me see, I'm sorry, did I skip something? Fur from the Great Lakes flowed down the Ottawa and St. Lawrence rivers to the French. So they were getting the fur during the years that followed, and the Algonquin and their allies dominated the Ottawa and St. Lawrence valleys. However, the Iroquois remained a constant threat. Now, mind you, the Algonquin are on their territory, right? Why should they be worried about the Iroquois unless the Iroquois are waging some kind of conflict with the Algonquins? They're on their territory now, making use of their fur trade with the French. Were the Iroquois being led by Britain? Why did they keep coming for us? It wasn't our tradition to invade other Indians' territories until apparently we have the colonizers behind us, right? Egging us on. And so we're going to do what we normally do not do. They were supposed, the Iroquois, the Algonquin were already moved out of their eastern territory, and they ended up in Ottawa or in Canada. So why are they now being threatened again by the Iroquois? Because they're doing good with that fur trade, and the Iroquois want in. That's the only thing I can think of. Okay, so fur from the Great Lakes flowed down the Ottawa and St. Lawrence rivers to the French during the years that followed, and the Algonquin and their allies dominated the Ottawa and St. Lawrence valleys. However, the Iroquois remained a constant threat. Why? They're on their territory. So they make a great law of peace, but they're warring with the Algonquins and starting shit, apparently, because the Algonquins are now on their territory, their own territory. Why the problems with the Iroquois? Anyway, okay, so the Iroquois remained a constant threat, and in winning the trade and friendship with the Algonquin, the French had made a dangerous enemy for themselves with the Iroquois Confederacy. So the Iroquois were, you know, sticking their nose to fuck up the business of other indigenous. They're getting greedy, right? This is not how Indians were treating each other, again, before they started siding with the colonizer, is my understanding. Because we had, what do you call it? A code. What do you call it? It's sort of an honor code. This is our territory, you know. I mean, there were conflicts, but generally, we were to stay out of other Indians' territory. So the Iroquois are getting quite greedy, is what it looks like to me. The French had made a dangerous enemy for themselves. It did not take long for the focus of the fur trade to move farther west because the French had already learned about the trapping areas to the west controlled by the Huron. Now, the Huron are part of the Algonquins, who were Algonquin allies, okay, against the Iroquois. And I'm sorry, they just said that. So the quantity and quality of the fur available from the Huron could not be ignored. And in 1614, the French and Huron signed a formal treaty of trade and alliance at Quebec. The following year, Champlain made his second journey up the Ottawa River to the Huron villages south of Georgian Bay. While there, he participated in a Huron-Algonquin attack on the Oneida. The Oneida are part of the Iroquois, and the Onondaga villages. These tribes were part of the Iroquois Confederacy, confirming in the minds of the Iroquois, in case they still had doubts, that the French were their enemy. The Iroquois, who had been displaced from the the Iroquois who had been displaced from the St. Lawrence Valley by the Algonquins, Montagnais, and the Hurons before the French had come to North America, had never accepted their loss of this territory as permanent. This is interesting because my understanding is that it was the Iroquois who forced the Algonquins to take those Canadian territories, you know? So it's interesting now they're saying the Iroquois had been displaced from the St. Lawrence Valley by the Algonquins. I don't know about that, because to me, clearly the Algonquins are not the premier indigenous. They're not in bed with the colonizer like the Iroquois, right? So I don't see that they really caused the Iroquois a whole lot of harm or damage. I mean, it's looking like the Iroquois maybe started to win once the Europeans arrived, if I could say it right. But I still don't, I haven't read that the Algonquins were ever coming for the Iroquois, you know? It seemed like they were always on the run from the Iroquois. So this is the first time that I'm seeing something about a displaced Iroquois. Well, you probably displaced because you took over the Algonquins' land, and they took basically like traded places because they wanted to be on the coast, the East Coast. So they to give that land to the British is what it's looking like. Again, this is what it was looking like. What it ended up being. The Iroquois by this time had exhausted the beaver in their traditional homeland and needed additional hunting territory to maintain their position with the Dutch, who at that time were transporting their purchases through modern day New York. See, that's why I think the East Coast was so important to the Iroquois. Their inability to satisfy the demand for beaver was the very reason the Dutch had tried in 1624 to open trade with the Algonquin and Montagnais. For the Iroquois, the obvious direction for expansion was north, but the alliance of the Huron and Algonquin with the French made this impossible. Well, you can't have everything. You just can't have everything, Iroquois. You can't have the East Coast and Canada and just you doing business with the French and the British. Why do you feel like you need to take over like that? You're not the only tribe here, It only was a problem because they were trying to dominate. Okay, that's what it was. And they sound like they were bullies, to be honest. Their inability to satisfy demand for beaver, so they were weak in the business. They weren't given product, whereas the Algonquins they were given product. So the Iroquois were failing to deliver. So now they want to, bogart their way into a business that's going very well for the Algonquins. So for the Iroquois, the obvious direction for expansion was north. Then why did you come to the East Coast? But the alliance of the Huron and Algonquin with the French made this impossible. The Iroquois at first attempted diplomacy to gain permission, but the Huron and Algonquin refused. Yeah, well, I think they should have. And with no other solution available, the Iroquois resorted to force in what is generally considered the opening battle of the Beaver Wars in 1630 through 1700. It's a long time, man. The Mohawk attacked the Algonquin Montagnais trading village at Sillery, just outside of Quebec in 1629. By 1630, both the Algonquin and Montagnais, these words are very new to me. Both the Algonquin and Montagnais needed French help to fight the invader, but this was not available, taking advantage of a European war between Britain and France. Sir David Kirke captured Quebec in 1629, and the British held Canada until 1632, when it was returned to France by the Treaty of Saint-Germain and Laye. These 3 years were a disaster for the French allies. Since their own trade with the Dutch was not affected, the Iroquois were able to reverse their losses of territory in the St. Lawrence Valley. They drove the Algonquin and Montagnais from the upper St. Lawrence. When they returned to Quebec in 1632, the French attempted to restore the previous balance of power along St. Lawrence by providing firearms to their Algonquin and Montagnais allies. However, the initial sales were restricted to Christian converts, which did not confer any real advantage to the Algonquin. See? So the French didn't even trust the Algonquin. They wouldn't even trust the Algonquin to help them in their business. So they only trusted weapons to the Christians. Why would you do that when you need all of the Algonquins' help? It's a mess, y'all. This is a mess, a full mess. This is why the Algonquins, I don't think they really got a leg up. Because I do believe that the British really supported the Iroquois more than the French were supporting the Algonquin. But if we just read correctly, the French were in a treaty with the British. So it's just too many different allegiances going on here. But one thing for sure, I don't think none of it works out well for the indigenous. But the Iroquois, I think they still do better because they were really, again, that group that the colonizer could use. I'm going to say it like that, use. So let's look at this now. So the British come, and the first Indians they see are the Algonquins. But they don't side with the Algonquins. Why? Because you want to side with the enemy of the Algonquins. Why? Obviously, you want to take over the territory of the Algonquins. And the Iroquois is like, we can help with that. Okay, these 3 years were a disaster for the French allies. Okay, we read that. Okay. So, however, the initial sales, they had to sell them weapons, were restricted. This is not sounding like an ally by any means. I would think you want to give them weapons. So I'm sorry, I don't know why I leave the TV on when I'm doing videos. I get so seduced. Okay. Did not convert any advantage to the Algonquins. Yeah. How you going to give us guns and not give us enough to help you? I guess you didn't want to help us. The roving Algonquin bands had proven resistant to the initial missionary efforts of the Black Robes, and the Jesuits had concentrated instead on the Montagnais and Huron. So the Algonquin, they didn't give in too easy to religious conversion. But trouble continued as the Algonquins developed divisions among themselves over religion. Many Algonquin converts to the new religion left the Ottawa Valley and settled first at Trois Rivières, and then Sillery. This weakened the main body of traditional Algonquin, defending the trade route through the Ottawa Valley. The consequences quickly became apparent. The Dutch had reacted to the French arming their native allies with large sales of firearms to the Mohawk. So now the Dutch are giving weapons to the Iroquois, which Mohawks were part of the Iroquois, who passed these weapons along to their other Iroquois. And the fur trade degenerated into an arms race. After 7 years of increasing violence and peace, a peace was arranged in 1634. The Algonquin used this period to start trading with the Dutch in New York. A definite no-no so far as the Iroquois were concerned. And the war resumed. So once the colonizers have us fighting each other, we're the dummies, okay? Including the Iroquois. although I think they had an upper hand because it seems like they're the only, I think they're the ones seen as the civilized ones for so much dealing with the Europeans, right? Okay. Weakened by the departure of Christian converts to Trois Riveries, I don't know, the ancillary, the Algonquin could not stop the onslaught that followed. Iroquois offensives during 1636 and 1637 drove the Algonquin further north into the upper Ottawa Valley and forced the Montagnais east towards Quebec. Only a smallpox epidemic, which began in New England during 1634 and then spread to New York and the St. Lawrence Valley, slowed the fighting. A real escalation in hostilities occurred in 1640 when British traders on the Connecticut River in western Massachusetts attempted to lure the Mohawk from the Dutch with offers of guns. The Dutch responded to this by providing the Mohawk, and thus the Iroquois, with as many of the latest high-quality firearms as they wanted. Now, it doesn't sound like this was a sale. They gave them as much as they wanted, right? So that's how you support your allies. French. That was a very bad French connection, okay? Why were you selling arms to Indians that you needed? Because you weren't really on their side. Come on now. Come on now. Now, these Dutch wasn't playing. They said, here, you on our side, take these guns and do what you got to do, right? High quality firearms, all that they wanted. The effect of this new firepower in the hands of Iroquois warriors was immediate. Some Algonquin tribesmen, such as the Wescarini along the Ottawa River, were forced to abandon their villages and move north and east. By the spring of 1642, the Mohawk and their allies had succeeded in completely driving many groups of Algonquin and Montagnais from the upper St. Lawrence and lower Ottawa rivers, while in the west, other allies, Seneca, Oneida, and Onondaga, fought the Huron. To shorten the travel distance from Huron, the Algonquin traders, the French in 1642 established a new post at Montreal, Ville-Marie. However, this only seemed to make matters worse. The Iroquois soon sent war parties north into Ottawa Valley to attack the Huron and Algonquin canoe fleets, transporting fur to Montreal and Quebec. Other setbacks to the Algonquins and Hurons brought the French fur trade to a complete standstill. And Champlain's successor, Charles Hart de why are these words so crazy? Montmagny. Charles Hualt de Montmagny had little choice but to seek peace. Montmagny eventually agreed to a treaty permitting the French to resume their fur trade, but it contained a secret agreement requiring French neutrality in future wars between the Algonquin and the Huron allies and the Iroquois. This agreement was in exchange for a Mohawk promise to refrain from attacks on the Algonquin and Montagnais villages, where the Jesuits had missions. There was a pause in the fighting during which Huron and Algonquin furs flowed east to Quebec in unprecedented amounts. Sound like they were just giving these French all of their fur. Like, didn't y'all need that fur too? While the Iroquois renewed efforts to gain the permission of the Huron to hunt north of St. Lawrence. Okay, there was a pause in fighting during which the Huron, okay, so they stopped fighting each other so that the Iroquois renewed efforts to gain permission of the Huron to hunt north of St. Lawrence. Refused after 2 years of failed diplomacy, the Iroquois resorted to total war. See, it sounds like it's always the Iroquois that resort to war when, so they're a very warring tribe. And yet they're the ones that started the what? Great Law of Peace, when you don't really go by peace. But it is a good front, right? To make you look good, right? Refused after 2 years of failed diplomacy, the Iroquois once again resorted to total war, but this time with the assurance that the French would remain neutral. The Mohawk chose to ignore the distinction between Christian and non-Christian Algonquins and almost exterminated a group near Trois Rivières in 1647. The Iroquois overran and completely destroyed the Huron. During 1650, the remaining Algonquin in the Upper Ottawa Valley were attacked and overrun. There is evidence that some Algonquins remained in the headwaters of the tributary rivers. During the following years, the French tried to continue their fur trade by asking native traders to bring their furs to Montreal. Iroquois war parties roamed the length of the Ottawa River during 1650s and 60s, making travel extremely dangerous for anyone not part of large, heavily armed by who? The British. Heavily armed convoys. By 1664, the French had decided they had endured enough of living in constant fear of the Iroquois. Yeah, well, you should have helped the Algonquins for real, dumbasses. Then maybe you would have had a better chance. But you want to half-ass help the Indian that you getting all their fur, but you don't want to give them all the weapons that they need? The arrival of regular French troops in Quebec that year and their subsequent attacks on villages in the Iroquois homeland brought a lasting peace in 1667. By 1664, the French had decided they had endured enough of living in constant fear of the Iroquois. The arrival of regular French troops in that year. Subsequent attack for a lasting peace. I don't understand what they're saying. The arrival of regular French troops in Quebec that year, and their subsequent attacks on villages in the Iroquois homeland brought a lasting peace. So it sounds like they're saying that they defeated Iroquois. So they sent regular troops to do that. Okay. This not only allowed French traders and missionaries to travel to the western Great Lakes, but permitted many of the other Algonquins to begin a gradual return to the Ottawa Valley. During the next 50 years, the French established trading posts for the Algonquins at Abitibi, Abitibi. And we're not even going to try that word. Can we make this bigger? Should this before? Okay. Turn around. During the next 50 years, the French established trading posts for the Algonquin at Abitibi and Temiskaming at the north end of the Ottawa Valley. Missions were also built at Les Hauts-Tourtes and Saint Anne de Bois de Ile. And in 1721, French missionaries convinced approximately 250 Nipissing and 100 Algonquin to join the 300 Christian Mohawk at the Sulpician mission village of Lake of Two Mountains, Lac de Deux Montagnes, just west of Montreal. This strange mix of former enemies, both of whom had converted to Christianity and allied with the French, became known by both its Algonquin name, Oka Pickerel, and the Iroquois form, Kennesaw Sandy Place. Okay, this strange mix of former enemies, both of whom had converted to Christianity and allied with the French, became known by both its Algonquin name, Oka Pickerel, and the Iroquois form, Kennesaw Sandy Place. So Oka means Pickerel and Kennesaw means sandy place. For the most part, the Algonquin converts remained at Oka only during the summer and spent their winters at the traditional hunting territories in the upper Ottawa Valley. This arrangement served the French well, since the Algonquin converts at Oka maintained close ties with the northern bands and could call upon the inland warriors to join them in case of war with the British and Iroquois League. All of the Algonquin converts were committed to the French cause through a formal alliance known as the Seven Nations of Canada, or the Seven Fires of Caughnawaga. Members included Caughnawaga, Mohawk, those are Iroquois. Okay, so the members included Iroquois, Lake of the Two Mountains, Mohawk, Algonquin, and Nipissing. Saint Francois, Sokoke, Pennacook, and New England Algonquin. Beckenor, Eastern Abenaki, Oswegatchie, Onondaga and Oneida, Lorette, Huron, and St. Regis, Mohawk. So the Algonquin remained important French allies until the French and Indian War, as the 7 Years' War was known in North America. So then finally the French had a French and Indian War in 1755 to 1763. By the summer of 1760, the British had captured Quebec and were close to taking the last French stronghold at Montreal. The war was over in North America, and the British had won the race for control of North America. So that means the Iroquois, that's when they start to really become the creme de la creme. of all the indigenous. See, they needed, and this is what I want to say to you, Iroquois, you needed the British to back you up, didn't you? Who knows how you would have fared if you didn't have the British supplying you with all the weapons you needed, or the Dutch, or whatever, supplying you with all the weapons you needed to come for your brothers. I'm gonna have to put you all in the same category as Africans. For real, though, for real. Okay. You're worse, actually. Okay. Okay. The war was over in North America and the British had won the race. I think this is also why, the Algonquins ended up being part of Canada, because the Iroquois had sort of gave Britain, what did they say? The race for control of North America. Thank you, Iroquois. Thank you. Now you got a foreigner completely running us ever since. Thank you, Iroquois. Confederacy. In mid-August, the Algonquin and 8 other former French allies met with the British representative, Sir William Johnson, and signed a treaty in which they agreed to remain neutral in future wars with British and French. So they could use us to fight each other, but we couldn't use them. Okay? Mm-hmm. This is a hot fucking mess. Okay? It is a hot shit bed of mess. Okay. Okay, so this sealed the fate of the French at Montreal and North America. After the war, Johnson used his influence with the Iroquois, thank you, Iroquois, to merge the Iroquois League and the 7 nations of Canada into a single alliance in the British interest. Iroquois. Y'all riding high with these Europeans, wasn't you? The sheer size of this group was an important reason the British were able to crush the Pontiac Rebellion around the Upper Lakes in 1763 and quell the unrest created by the encroachment of white settlers in Ohio country during the years which followed. The sheer size was also a factor in King George's decision to proclaim that Indian territory should be reserved for their use in perpetuity. I'm not sure what I just read. The territory should be reserved for whose use? Okay, this sealed the fate of the French at Montreal, at North America. After the war, Johnson used his influence with the Iroquois to merge the Iroquois League and the 7 nations of Canada into a single alliance in British interest. The sheer size of this group was an important reason the British were able to crush the Pontiac Rebellion around the Upper Great Lakes in 1763 and quell the unrest created by the encroachment of white settlers in the Ohio country during the years which followed. The sheer size was also a factor in King George's decision to proclaim that Indian territory should be reserved for their use in perpetuity. It sounds like he was reserving territory for the Indians, I think, okay? Johnson died suddenly in 1774, but his legacy lived on, and the Algonquin fought alongside the British. During the American Revolution, 1775 1783, participating in St. Leger's campaign in the Mohawk Valley in 1778. The Algonquin homeland was supposed to be protected from settlement by the proclamation of 1763. But after the revolution ended in a rebel victory, thousands of British loyalist Tories left the new United States and settled in Upper Canada. So the Algonquins were betrayed. Their territory was supposed to be protected, and British loyalists or Tories left the new United States and settled in Upper Canada. To provide land for these newcomers, the British government in 1783 chose to ignore the Algonquin in the lower Ottawa Valley and purchased parts of eastern Ontario from Minas and a Mississauga Ojibwe chief. Despite this, Algonquin warriors fought beside the British during the War of 1812 to 1814 and helped defeat the Americans at the Battle of Chateauguay. Their reward for this service was the continued loss of their land to individual land sales and encroachment by American loyalists and British immigrants moving into the valley. The worst blow occurred when the British in 1822 were able to induce the Mississauga near Kingston on Lake Ontario to sell most of what remained of the traditional Algonquin land in the Ottawa Valley. And for a second time, no one bothered to consult the Algonquin, who had never surrendered their claim to the area, but still received nothing from its sale. Further losses occurred during the 1840s as lumber interests moved into the upper Ottawa Valley. Legislation in 1850 and purchases by the Canadian government eventually established 10 reserves, 1 in Ontario and 9 in Quebec for Algonquin use and occupation. These reserves only secured a tiny portion of what once had been their original homeland. Today, Algonquins continue to live on the Ottawa River and its tributaries. There is one reserve community in Ontario at Golden Lake, and numerous families living in communities with non-Algonquins in Bancroft, Ardoch, Banashery, Charbot Lake, Antoine, Mattawa, North Bay, Ottawa, and Whitney. What a bleak story. The Algonquins was getting fucked over, man. Even when they were helping. And this is the ones that they claim that, you know, we keep hearing that their territory is Canada. Don't look like it was working out too well for them in their own territory. So that's a history of the Algonquins. Let's kind of want to look at another history of Algonquins. Is this it? I guess this was it. Okay. Let's see some more, because that story was just downright depressing. Out of all our indigenous who got in bed with the Europeans, the Algonquins didn't even really get the benefit of helping the French. The part we read where the French only sold them guns and only to Christians, that's not a true ally. Yet you was like, they was giving you like the fur from the whole damn Canada, and you couldn't provide them with weapons. It's a shame. I think it just seems like maybe the French had a clue that the Iroquois and the British would take over, you know? And so that is why I guess they kind of helped you know, they kept enough of a connection with the Algonquin to get that fur, right? But you're not supporting them enough for them to be to live in peace on their land. You're not giving them enough support for them to be able to maneuver. You're just giving them enough support so they can provide you with that fur. How can you not give them guns that they needed when you know that they were getting their asses kicked? So unfortunately, indigenous, this kind of chasm between us cannot be overlooked as we wake up. I don't see how it can be. We're looking back and we are reclaiming stuff, but this also brings up what we had going on with each other. And I just feel like for all their efforts, all the Iroquois really established was that America is completely dominated by Britain now. That's all I see for all of their efforts. What did the Iroquois, what did they accomplish for the majority of Indians, except a life where they are reclassified? And I don't know what kind of deal the Iroquois got, but I know they get a lot of name recognition. Everything that, I think their language is the main one that we hear about, even among today's indigenous. They're not using Algonquin language. They're using all the greetings for that Iroquois would use, you know, Halito and all of that, you know. So that's why I choose to use Algonquin language from now on, Kwe Kwe, because I want to show these American Indians that they still belong. Yeah, you got you know, treated really bad by the Iroquois Confederacy once they got on board with Europe, you know. And it seemed like They really helped to bring America to where it's not even really run, well, unless it's secretly run by Iroquois, you know, and Europeans, as well as Africans, because they might as well, you might as well be on the side of Africans because you're not helping the Algonquins. And what would be the reason for that? It's territory. But this is interesting because, see, we're hearing all about this, right? But this is part of Algonquin territory as well. And that goes all the way down to North Carolina, okay? So that's what I didn't appreciate of what we just read. They say this is their original territory. So is this, okay? The Algonquins are the ones who first met the British. Immediately, the British side without Iroquois Confederacy. I mean, who can't do the math with that? It's really simple. It's that land, okay? Where it's located. Very easy to cross the Atlantic from Britain to here, right? It's much easier than going over here, right? So you want to, when you cross over, you just want to land right here and be done. Okay? Thank you, Iroquois. Thank you, Iroquois. So let's get through this. This is only 3 pages. Okay, so this is the Algonquin peoples. One of the most populous and widespread Native American groups, Algonquin tribes, consist of peoples that speak Algonquin languages and historically shared cultural similarities. There are hundreds of original tribes that spoke several related dialects of the language group. Historically, they lived across northeastern North America, from the Atlantic Ocean, see, now we're talking, to the Rocky Mountains, okay? So stop with all of this, okay, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains. And from northern Canada to the Carolinas. And that's where my people are, right here in the Carolinas, right about here. Okay, so Carolinas are broken up into only the very eastern part is Algonquin, from what I recall, because over here now you're going into Iroquois area, but this is all Algonquin, and that's what I don't like when articles are trying to say we only dealt in Canada, like above this line. See that line, America and Canada? They're putting us in Canada when we were well into the Americas as Algonquins. And right here, see, that was us, all of this. And they're saying that the Iroquois had New York, but it looked like this was Algonquin. That's New York right there, okay? Long Island, and then here, New York. So it looks like the Iroquois did not have all of New York, because that's Long Island right there, Brooklyn, the whole, that's right there. And then it goes well into here, where this part of New York is here, New York State, right? That was all Algonquin language, see the Algonquin language distribution. So they were not speaking Iroquois, they were speaking Algonquin, all of the red area. Okay? Historically, again, they lived across eastern North America, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains, and from the northern Canada to the Carolinas. Before Europeans came into contact, most Algonquin settlements lived by hunting, trapping and fishing, and gathering roots, nuts, wild rice, fruit, and berries. Although quite a few supplemented their diet by cultivating corn, beans, and squash. Some tribes also grew tobacco. Because northern weather patterns made growing food difficult, many Algonquin tribes moved their families from place to place. Okay. They traveled on foot in canoes made of birch bark and used snowshoes and toboggans in the snow. Their garments, as well as their shelters, known as wigwams, were fashioned with animal skins. At the time of the first European settlements in North America, Algonquin tribes occupied much of Canada east of the Rocky Mountains and what is now New England, New Jersey, southeastern New York, and Delaware, and down the Atlantic coast through the upper South and around the Great Lakes in present day Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. Many of the tribes were at war with the Iroquois Confederacy. Excuse me. The Algonquin were among the first North American natives to strike alliances with the French, who adopted Algonquin means of travel in terms like canoe and toboggan. The English settlements were often engaged in border wars with their Algonquin neighbors. This is where the Iroquois Confederacy comes to the aid of the English. No doubt. Okay? I don't even think the Iroquois wanted the territory of the Algonquin until Britain came on the scene, is what I'm thinking. Okay. So I'm sorry. Okay. The Eastern tribes, I'm sorry, I skipped. The English settlements were often engaged in border wars with their Algonquin neighbors who continually pressed farther toward the interior by the advancing white immigration. Kept up for a time a feudal struggle for the possession of their territory. Okay, so the Algonquins kept up for a time a feudal struggle for the possession of their territory. The Eastern tribes from Maine to the Carolinas, now here's where we find out what happened, were defeated and their tribal organization was broken up. Some withdrew to Canada. See, they withdrew to Canada. But I guess that was part of their territory too. But see, they left the Northeast, the Eastern Sea coast. You know, they were down as far as the Carolinas. Okay, so they were not Canadian as so much like we always hear. Okay, Ohio Valley. Okay, so the Eastern tribes from Maine to the Carolinas were defeated by who? The Iroquois. And their tribal organization was broken up. Some withdrew to Canada. Okay, the Iroquois and the British, okay, if that makes it better. Okay. The Eastern tribes from England were defeated and their tribal organization was broken up. See, our tribes were broken up. Some withdrew to Canada, others crossed the mountains into the Ohio Valley, while a few bands were located on reservations by the whites, only to dwindle and ultimately become extinct. The Abenaki and others who fled into Canada were settled along the St. Lawrence River under the protection of the French, whose active allies they became in all the subsequent wars with the English down to the fall of the French power in Canada. Those who crossed the Allegheny Mountains into the Ohio Valley, together with the Wyandot and the native Algonquin tribes of that region, formed themselves into a loose confederacy. allied first with the French and afterward with the English against the advancing settlements with the declared purpose of reserving the Ohio River as the Indian boundary. General Wayne's victory in 1794 put an end to the struggle, and at the Treaty of Greenville in 1795, the Indians acknowledged their defeat and made their first cession. Should it be cessation? I don't know. Of land west of the Ohio River. Shawnee Chief Tecumseh, Shawnee Chief Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, instigated by the British, again aroused the Western tribes against the United States, the corporation, a few years later, but the disastrous defeat at Tippecanoe, Indiana in 1811, and the death of their leader broke the spirit of the Indians. In 1815, those who had taken part against the United States during the War of 1812 made peace with the government. Then began the series of treaties by which, within 30 years, most of the Indians of this region ceded their lands and removed west of the Mississippi River. Algonquin tribes of the New England area include Mohegan, Pequot, Narragansett, Wampanoag, Massachusetts. Oh wow, there's a tribe called Massachusetts. Nipmuc, Pennacook, Abenaki, Maliseet, and Passamaquoddy. The Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and a variety of Cree groups lived in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Upper Michigan. In the Midwest lived the Shawnee, the Alienating, the Kickapoo, the Menominee, Miami. That's a tribe. Miami's a tribe. And Sac-a-Fox. The Great Plains were called the home to the Arapaho, Blackfoot, and Cheyenne. In the Mid and South Atlantic were the traditional homes of the Powhatan, Lumbee, Nanticoke, Lenape, the Munsee, and the Mohican. The Mohican peoples. Other Algonquin tribes reside in Canada. Now, they didn't name the one that my people, I believe, were a part of, and that was the Pasquotank. But we saw that, I think we looked at, did we look at that map? No, we didn't. I don't think. So that's a lot of tribes. And maybe, fellow Algonquins, maybe we really need to gather with these groups and reclaim our land along the East Coast. And I don't know about these pictures, y'all. I really don't. Okay. Okay, so I wanted this article because it showed that we were not just in Canada, okay? We were not. We did run up there because I think we did. I'm starting to believe we were up there, but we were over here just as well. But we only hear about this, So what else was I going to? I actually want to, if I can, with what do you call it? Fair use. Play part of a video that I And if I can get to the place that I don't know. Okay, I think I want to. This is by Jaguar Bird, and there were just elements of this video that I liked. Let me get myself over here, and this was the Algonquins of North Carolina. And this group is called the Chawanoki. We didn't even read that. See, they don't include all the different smaller tribes, I think. But there was some things in this video that I kind of like what I was seeing. Now, do I want to play it from the beginning? I do, because I want to see the picture. So let's watch. It is a 28-minute video. I don't know if maybe I'll skip. Fair use, this is just for educational purposes, and this is not for monetary gain. So I'm mirroring Jaguar Bird. Please visit his channel to watch the whole video, because I'm not going to play the whole video. And he calls this the Chawanaki people, aka the Chawanak Algonquin of North Carolina. This is the closest I could get to where my people were from. So I kind of appreciate this video. And I wanted to show, now he's showing different races of Algonquin, but you will take note of those full bloods that he does display in this video. Okay, so let's take a look. Eastern Woodland. This is a lot of Algonquin. So this is Algonquin. Look at this. Look at this. Now this map is even bigger than what we saw, right? Look at all that Algonquin territory. It looks more. It looks bigger than what we saw, unless just the way it looks here. Maybe it's just the way it looks, but this looks like a lot more. You see, we were right. Here's the Carolinas that we were, and the Powhatan. Same linguistic group here. Mohican, Abenaki, Delaware. So, Fox. It was big. Blackfoot is over here. Ojibwe, I'm sorry, Ojibwe. Cree, Ojibwe, Cree. Oh wow, big. So here's New York, right? So here would have been the part of New York that the Iroquois had. But here toward the coast, now see, I think this is what the Iroquois wanted. Iroquois were not on the coast as much, except for lower America. Okay, so let's let this play. Just get another look at this shot. So this view makes it look a little choppy. Like there's look like a white area here. So it's looking like they're saying only part of that Long Island was Algonquin. So we were really, and here's completely not a whole opening right there. So it looks a little more choppy with this version of, the story. All Algonquin, or the white area, I believe. Let me look again. I believe that's all Algonquin. unless I'm wrong. Yeah, Algonquin right here, right? Oh, wait a minute. They're showing some Iroquois. Okay, so Iroquois. I guess this is just the whole area being, all shown all together. So here's the look, New York here. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe this is the 6th. The Confederacy right there, the Iroquois Confederacy, was the Seneca, the Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, and Mohican. Okay. Let's let the video play. Let's look at them people that they're going to show us. The resolution of that's Roanoke Nation. Check this out. What's going on here? Look at these Indians. Now she looks like she's mixed, and she got some of that. But what's going on here? What's going on over here? What's going on over there, over there, and over there, and over there? See? That's what indigenous people look like. Well, she's clearly mixed. She looks mixed, and she looks like, that's why she's hugging her. But she's like, yeah, me and you, we got that mix going on. This brother right here, and that brother right there. And these sisters over here. See, if this is the husband and the wife, then this is all their children. That's why she's looking a little like mommy. But the other family they got the daddy all the way, So okay, so I hope you can hear. The Shawanoe people, also spelled Chaminade people at the South, are an Algonquin language American tribe who has historically inhabited the coastal area of the upper South of the United States, the coastal area, you see? It was a very advantageous land for people coming from Britain. Okay. Trying to find, because this is where my people were. This is the area. They're I believe they're right up here. I think that's the Pascaton. It's right there. But let's look. At the time of the first English contact in 1585 to 1586, they were the largest and most powerful Algonquin tribe, the Choanoke, in present-day North Carolina, occupying most or all of the coastal banks of the Chowan River in the northeastern part of the state. Wait a minute, did we go back? I did not want to go back. Let's do like this. I guess somehow I went backwards. Sorry. Early indigenous cultures occupied the area from 4500 BC, y'all. Okay, so they were the largest. Mine was probably the smallest. I believe the area that my people were in was Pascapon was the smallest. So they merged with other indigenous groups and they lost the last of their communal land in 1821. So I'm sorry for the resolution. It couldn't get any better. Shawanoki descendants still live in the state, particularly in Gates and Chowan counties. Through the centuries, some families have maintained their Chawanoke identity, while others intermarried and gradually identified with other ethnic groups. So this is what happens when the tribe breaks down, I realize. And I think this is why the United States was able to basically call us black and colored and all of that, because they knew the tribe, we were losing our tribe affiliation, so we were losing our identity. The Algonquin peoples, who developed into what is now known as North Carolina, migrated from northern coastal areas and developed a culture that was modified by local conditions. So the Algonquin people who developed into what is now known as North Carolina migrated from northern coastal areas and developed a culture that was modified by local conditions. Fair use. And thank you to I get his name again. Numerous tribes occupied an approximately 6,000 square mile area of Carolina Algonquin territory in northeastern North Carolina, from Neuse River to Chesapeake Bay. See, this helped me to get a little bit of it. I chose this video because it was the only one that spoke about a tribe, our tribe in North Carolina that were Algonquin, you know. And this is the largest Algonquin tribe. Like I said before, I'm pretty sure I read that my tribe was the smallest, the Pasquotank. That's the area that my people lived in, the Pasquotank, along the Pasquotank River, Elizabeth City. It's shown here, so there it is. My people lived right in this area. So we were very close to, maybe we were part of the Chawanoke. No, they were over here. But I know Pasquotank is also said as Pasquotank. It's Pasquotank or Pasquotank, sort of like Algonk, Pasquotank. So yeah, we lived in Elizabeth City, or also had been called Camden, but it was, excuse me, this our area was Pasquotank. So we were close to the Chawanoke, where they were centered, very close, not that far from them. Like the next set of Indians over. So I just want to show this. I like how the Carolinas have this, I don't even know what to call it, this line of islands, you know, all around them, like a gate, like a gateway or something. Kind of cool. Can you imagine living along this? You know, it's very, it looks very thin, compared to here. And I'm sure they get, weather coming off the ocean, you know, but it's like a little gate to south to the Carolinas. Okay, I don't want to show the whole video, but it had some slides that said some things that I thought were interesting. Look at all of our people, y'all. Look at all these quote unquote Negroes. Is it an Indian? You can read that. Okay, he's amalgamated looking, and they do show some half bloods or less than half bloods in this video. Okay, I might start skipping around a little bit. Let me see. So the Choano go back to 825 AD, but the people, as we saw, were BC before they were known as Choano. So there's some nobility going on. Pardon me, people. I guess I am. It is a little late, and I'm here. See, neighboring Irawakan-speaking Tuscarora people who had inhabited areas to the inland moved in and expelled the remaining Chowanoke from their territory along. So these Iroquois, y'all, I'm telling you, they are looking like the most warring people on the fucking land, man. This is John Smith and the whole Pocahontas story. Jamestown, Virginia. Is that North Carolina? Must be North Carolina, I guess. I don't know. I think they're talking about Virginia now. And on orders from Captain John Smith of Jamestown, he was from Jamestown, found that hardly any Chowanoke people were left along the Chowan River. And of course, they're making him look white, you know. Who's to say what he really was? They had been reduced to one settlement across the river in Gates County on Bennett's Creek. There's a brother alert. It's an Indian, y'all. Full blood. Several decades later, in 1644 and 1675 through 77, the Chowanoke people had regained sufficient strength to wage two wars against English settlers. They met defeat each time. Remember, the Iroquois were siding with the English, the British, most of the time. So they were taking our land and then giving us little parts of it. But this is a pretty good amount of acres. But hey, compared to what we had, I guess that's not much. I kind of want to look at this slide here. Once they were landless, The Shawanoe people were often no longer considered, let's say, indigenous Americans. So, see, this helped me to see why it was important to get us outside of the tribes and also get us outside of our land. Once we were landless, when we moved to the north, we were landless. When we left our farms, we were landless. So we were no longer considered indigenous Americans. I thought that was very interesting. The European Americans tended to reclassify or classify everyone as either colored, even free people of color, or white, not taking into account the continued existence of indigenous American people. This is the paper genocide. I think we can safely conclude, like I said before, once you're genocided on paper, the next step is to genocide you in real life while you're under the delusion that you're colored or black or Negro. Okay, so these are the slides I kind of want to show. I think that was it. In Virginia, let me see. In the 20th century, more disruption of tribal identity occurred under racial segregation laws, which were passed in all the southern states, getting you out of tribal identity or affiliation, I guess. Excuse me. In Virginia, for instance, many indigenous Americans who had maintained their culture were reclassified as colored rather than recorded in vital records as Indian. This is our problem here in the Americas. This is the problem of all so-called African Americans. We are not African. The corporation is responsible for this. So this group did reorganize as a group known as the Chawanoe Indian Nation. And there they go, mixed. But I hope they're not federally recognized. Excuse me. That's like someone said, it's like being on welfare. When you're on welfare, you're not sovereign. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Let me see. I did play most of the video, which I didn't intend to, but there were so many. There were so many. There were a couple of slides in there that I really liked. And it's a little late, so I might not get to what I want to show here. Well, this is something I want to read here, but I can't make it bigger. Just more about the paper genocide. I think Virginians, Indians continued to struggle for survival into the 20th century. In 1924, the General Assembly of Virginia directed the state registrar of vital statistics to lay the foundation for a more systematic process of document genocide practiced against Indians residing in the state. The brutal enforcement of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 enable state officials to destroy Virginia Indians' records and reclassify them and their descendants as colored and later Black. If you call yourself an Indian, this is what I want to read. You could be imprisoned, denied the right to public schools, refused employment, forbidden to obtain a marriage certificate, or barred from having your newborn child released from the hospital to go home. Do you see what we were up against and how we began to give up our identity? Look what they were doing to us. You might not be able to take your baby home if you said you were Indian. All of these are crimes. They're crimes and discrimination against indigenous people. I don't even want to say humanity anymore. I want to say indigenous people. And if you could just take a screenshot of that or something. I wish I could make it bigger, but this is the actual web page, so I can't make it bigger to read, though I want to. Yes, the brutal enforcement of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 enables state officials to destroy Virginia Indians' records and reclassify them and their descendants as colored and later Black. If you call yourself Indian on your census or anywhere that they could see, you could be imprisoned. How is that a crime? This is what we need reparations for. If you're talking about reparations, these were acts that a government committed, and they can't figure out how to pay us back. Well, how about telling the truth, number one, okay? And being very clear about it. No more this under the radar crap. The whole world has to know who we are and what was done to us. When they do that to us, they deny us access to our land that were held in trust, and they rob us of being the people that are not to be taxed. So all the tax money we paid, at least that could be part of reparation, because we weren't supposed to pay that. You could give that back. Anyway, this is what I want to show here. I didn't focus on Iroquois, but we did read about them. I don't know if I want to feature them. You know, I realize, you know, I want to speak about Algonquin, the ones who were basically my people, number one, and number two, the ones who really got the raw end of all of this. I think Algonquins lost their identity even more so than the Iroquois did, at least. So I think I'm going to close here because I was falling asleep on you, and it's almost 6 o'clock in the morning. It's just about 6 o'clock in the morning. So I think I'll close it here. I don't know how long this video is, but we spent a good enough time. I want to give another shout out to Jaguar Bird. Fair use, I hope, for using your video. It's just he made some good points, and as a fellow Algonquin, I felt he spoke to our people and did them, you know, a solid with this video, telling us what, you know, once again, how we got chased out by Iroquois. Thank you. Always being removed by our own people. So thank you for this, Jaguar Bird. Thank you, fair use. Thank you. I just had to show some of what you was putting out there. And I do have more to talk about. I just don't think I'm going to do it right now because I was dozing off earlier. It's embarrassing, and I'm still, I don't know if I could, edit that out, but yeah, this is just little extra sidebars on the Iroquois. Why did the Iroquois choose to side with the British? Well, the British, I think, sought them out because the British met the Algonquin. So the British sought out the Iroquois, if you ask me. We will give them that much because the British knew what territory they wanted, okay? The British, like the Dutch before them, allowed the Iroquois to create a hegemony among the other nations of the region. The French were resistant to the idea that any one nation or confederacy should become dominant and attempted a much wider and more equitable alliance among and with Algonquin and Iroquois speakers like the Huron, Iroquoian speakers like the Huron, the Petun, Erie. Many of these French allied tribes were traditional enemies of the 5, later 6 Iroquois nation confederacy. So the French didn't want one dominant tribe. That's exactly the opposite of what the British wanted. They didn't care. As long as they were getting what they wanted, they didn't care who got dominated or who was doing the dominating. They were just going to help that element to get what they wanted. They want to use those Indians to get what the British wanted, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know if I want to read all of this. Franklin's discontinuous state between the sea below and the Iroquois above. This cartoon dates from 1754. The alliance with the Iroquois held at the traditional meeting point with the Iroquois, not just from the Revolution two decades later. So the Iroquois were just in bed, with the Europeans. Oh, here's an interesting point. Because we see the first, what I believe is democracy in a republic. And where did it come from? Well, Richard Sutton says, he's an author, by the way, probably the single most important lesson had to do with the form of government the 6 nations used, 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. Consensus democracy. Ben Franklin, among the founding fathers, spent time with the Seneca to learn about this in the days before the Continental Congress. It was completely unknown among the settlers of the crown. So democracy was created by the Iroquois Confederacy, is what that is saying. But you could read it. I'll leave it there. I just found that interesting. He's an author, Richard Sutton. That's what he has to say. Consensus democracy. We don't want a democracy. We want a republic that has a constitution. So here, what are we reading? So the Iroquois Confederacy creates a constitution, but when you create a democracy right after that, you might as well throw away your republic and your constitution, because a democracy overrides a constitution. It's going to be contract law. It's going to be laws that you contract into that are outside of the Constitution for the Republic. Okay, so interesting that the Iroquois had a hand in democracy, which is basically opposed to a Republican form of government. Iroquois were learning a lot, I think, or developing a lot with the British that really helped give them a leg up. It was the Iroquois. Why doesn't the Iroquois Confederation exist anymore? Oh, yes, it does. It still exists. The other day, the Canadian, whatever, made a public declaration against a revision of the Indian Act in Canada that would give Indigenous status to more people that lost it due to past discrimination. And they said they warned the Iroquois caucus leadership of their decision. However, the leadership in Onondaga is all on the US side with where their homeland is. So it's never the Confederacy that speaks in Quebec. Chenin Kika are a member of the Iroquois, member nation of the Iroquois. They are known in French as Agniers, in English as Mohawk. So they made a public declaration. Now, when would this have been? 3 years ago. It says 3 years right here. Against a revision that would give Indigenous status to more people that lost it. So it sounds like they're going against giving Indigenous status to people that lost it. If this is what I'm reading, it sounds like the Iroquois are taking a leader role in making sure that other Indigenous do not regain their Indigenous status. Is that, unless I'm reading this wrong, I am tired, so I'll have to play back this video or have someone who's of a more coherent mind than I am right now read that and tell me what you think it said. I'll read it again. It's okay. Why doesn't the Iroquois Confederation exist anymore? And the answer the person is saying here is it still exists. He's saying the other day the Mohawks made a public declaration against a revision in the Indian Act in Canada. They made a public declaration against a revision that would give Indigenous status to more people that lost it due to past discrimination. And they said they warned the Iroquois caucus leadership of their decision. However, the leadership in Onondaga is all on the US side, where their homeland is. So it is never the Confederacy that speaks in Quebec. Okay. That last part I'm not really hearing, but all I know is that the Iroquois Confederation member don't want indigenous status to be given back to people who lost it. Okay, that's all I understand about what I just read. So let's see. Yeah, I can't even try to read that. It's just too small, too blurry. Okay, so I think I'm gonna let that go for now. I'm gonna have to come back because I really gonna take a, an end of this video for now. A little bit late. Oh, this is a look at the Iroquois Confederacy here. This now they call it the Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Look at there. This is the people that the Iroquois Confederacy are now making their front men and women who don't look like full bloods, do they? So they'll blame this all on these people. Let's not even let's just not go there tonight. I don't have the energy right now. So I think I'm gonna call it a night. I want to go deeper, but there's always another opportunity to do a video. So I think I'll say thank you for watching. Um, my hope is that the Algonquin Confederacy will make itself known and take our rightful place. All the land that was taken from us, or we should get it back. We should get it back. Again, this land that's held in trust, we need to be where we can get access to that too. We don't owe the crown any money, any fiat, or any real currency or money, anything. We don't owe it. They owe us. We're the ones who never got the 40 acres. I mean, whatever. We should have got anything that was taken away from us, we should get back, even if it wasn't, if that was speaking to another tribe, we still lost our land. And we need that back, and we need a system, a government that will not drop a bomb on us when we're prospering. We just need to really be recognized again and left to be prosperous on our land without the interference of those who wish to not see us succeed. Okay. So thank you again for watching. I wish you peace and blessings and all the good things. Love, peace, joy, happiness, wealth, and your land back, your identity back, your birthright back. Thank you for watching. Till next time, peace.